this is sort of a multifaceted topic. I wanted to kind of mold and bring all of them together. So what the Russians are doing now is they're going to build a branch of their embassy in Israel in Jerusalem, right? So this is according to the Jerusalem Post. The Russians are going to open a new branch in Jerusalem in exchange for acknowledging the boundaries of Moscow's historic and present ownership of the plot of land on which the office will be built. Okay, so basically the Russians were having an issue with Israel acknowledging that this plot of land belongs to the Russians, right? And they had to go get the documents from their archives, in some place in Moscow, they said that the branch office of the consular section of the Russian embassy in Israel, as the embassy calls it, will be opened on the corner of King George and Ma'alot streets in downtown Jerusalem, where a parking lot is currently located. After Russia and the Jerusalem municipality, in cooperation with the foreign ministry, signed an agreement clarifying the boundaries of the plot. Okay, so this will include a residence for Russian diplomats and a conference hall, which makes it more than a regular consulate. So why is this important? Well, you guys remember that there are Jerusalem originally what was intended to be corpus separatum. So in Latin, this means a separate body, and it implies that it doesn't belong to anyone. It's because it's a holy city for Jews, Christians, Muslims, that it has such religious importance. It cannot be given to any one country, right? So it must be its own entity, right? Obviously, that never happened because the Israelis illegally annexed all of it, right? And any hopes of East Jerusalem, at the very least, the east of Jerusalem becoming the capital of Palestine, was also, robbed because the Israelis took all of it, and then they passed this Jerusalem law in 1980 and 1981, basically, allowing themselves, bestowing upon themselves the benevolent right to take possession of everything in Jerusalem, because Israel is the Jewish state and blah blah blah, and God's said so in the Bible, that they ignore the part about not killing people, apparently, right? Like 10 Commandments, they don't like to to reference that. But in any case, the UN came out and said you are not allowed to have Jerusalem. Any law that you pass is null and void. Get out of Jerusalem, get out of the Syrian Golan Heights. And, the United States accepted this. So when Donald Trump, moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, it was very shocking, because he was violating multiple UN Security Council resolutions. He was violating the initial idea of having Jerusalem as a separate body. And he was legitimizing and validating the Israeli annexation, right? Right now, everyone talks about Russia illegally annexing. Well, no one really seems to care when Israel illegally annexes and does it on a much larger scale and worse scale, right? So that's why it's kind of shocking to see the Russians now build a branch of the embassy in Jerusalem. And, you can look at it multiple ways. I mean, I think it's scandalous, honestly. I'm not going to sit here and trash Donald Trump for doing that and then give the Russians a pass. I'm not giving anyone a pass. There are 4 other countries. Most of them are Central American or Latin American. They also moved their embassies. I think Honduras is one of them, and perhaps Guatemala, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, the United States, moved its embassy there, and Biden keeps it, of course. And then Trump also thought that he has the power in his deluded mind to declare that the Syrian Golan Heights, which are occupied and also annexed by Israel, are part of Israel. Okay. Well, now I'm not going to give the Russians a pass. You could argue, though, that this is good for the Russians because they get to put another spying center there. Of course they do. It's not fair to say all, but let's say among big powers, definitely, absolutely, a lot of their embassies are spy stations, right? So it's just the way it is, because it's considered their own. I know. In this case, the Russians bought the land. You don't necessarily have to buy the plot of land. When you have an embassy or a diplomatic mission in another country, you don't necessarily have to buy the building, right? You could lease it, or rather rent it, and so on. But in this case, maybe the Israelis kind of cornered the Russians and said, fine, we will agree and accept your legal claim to the plot of land on the condition that you make part of your embassy here. Why would the Israelis do this? And again, I'm speculating. The Israelis might do this because it helps legitimize their illegal annexation of Jerusalem, right? Their theft of Jerusalem. Although I honestly, I know people attach a lot of importance to it because of its religious significance, to Christians, to Jews, to Muslims. You have the Aqsa Mosque there and so on. Me personally, I think all of Palestine is the issue, right? It's not because they took Jerusalem. It's the whole place, right? They really kind of they stole everything, all of it. But you know what I mean. Now, again, if the I know this is just a section of the Russian embassy. It's a branch. That's how they're framing it. Like, they're not moving the embassy, but this is good for the Israelis because they don't give a crap about a plot of land. It's good for them because it makes their annexation of Jerusalem look valid. And obviously we have to condemn that because everyone's so busy condemning the Russians for Ukraine, well, they forgot to condemn the Israelis for Palestine and Syria and so on. In any case, let me show you another piece of news. The Saudis are signaling, in case it wasn't obvious enough, they're really giving the finger now to this idea that there's going to be normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Like, it's over, right? When the Chinese mediated this peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia about 2 months ago, that was very clear. From that moment, it was very clear that they're not interested in normalization with Israel. Because once again, Trump, when he was doing his whole Abraham Accords and moving the embassy, he got Bahrain and he got the UAE to sign these accords and normalize ties with Israel, even though most people in Bahrain are disgusted by the prospect. And then it was highly speculated that Saudi Arabia would be next. And so now all of a sudden, instead of normalizing with Israel, Saudi Arabia is normalizing with Iran, and with Syria and with Yemen. I mean, what's going on here? Because Israel tried to convince Saudi Arabia that Iran is their common enemy, right? Oh my God, Iran is spreading, Shia sectarianism, and Iran is a threat to the region. They are competing for power with you, etc., right? So that was what the Israelis wanted, and then they wanted Saudi Arabia to normalize ties, and now the Saudis, right? So on top of the peace accords with Iran, a Saudi embassy spokesperson in Washington said that Riyadh's position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been clear and has been consistent for many years. In other words, my job is to translate politics for you. He's saying go to hell. There's no normalization. And he continues to say here that, in fact, it was the late King Abdullah who way back in 2002 introduced what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative at the Arab League Summit in Beirut that year. And the proposal, the initiative, does offer Israel normalization with all members of the Arab states in return for a just and comprehensive peace with the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. Okay? So he said that normalization, or rather the offer, really still remains on the table, but that the issue of Palestinian rights must be solved before normalization with Israel can move forward. And then, of course, Blinken, down below the poodle, saying that real national security interest to have normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'm sure it is. Well, in any case, this peace proposal that goes back to 2002, yes, it's true. The Arab League, well, sort of. I mean, half of them didn't show up, but there was this idea that if the Israeli, I think it was an attempt to call the Israelis bluff, okay? Because it says in the initiative that all the Arab countries will normalize ties with Israel if they give Palestinians their state, Again, it's like this ridiculous notion they have to beg the Israelis to give them one. But in any case, this was an attempt to call their bluff. And what happened? The Israelis didn't budge, right? So there's you have all the Arab states, and remember, they're not happy with this. Syria especially was saying like, "What the hell? We are not normalizing. We are not normalizing ties with Israel or recognizing Israel. This is far too generous, and we support the Palestinians' right to armed struggle. That's it, and that's always been the Syrian position. But in any case, even with this peace initiative, this proposal on the table, to this day, the Israelis refuse to accept it, refuse to help the Palestinians, refuse to stop, committing crimes of aggression against the Palestinians. They refuse to leave the Golan Heights because we know they're never going to do that. We know they're never going to leave Palestine. They're never going to leave the West Bank alone. They're never going to leave East Jerusalem or go back to the 1967 borders, which are mentioned in there. We know that. And so that's why this called their bluff. It shows you that no matter how generous and forthcoming you try to be with the Israelis, no matter what diplomatic resolution you put on the table, Israel does not care. Israel will not, Israel will not abandon the illegally annexed territories that it took. Doesn't care. You cannot reason with the Israelis. Unfortunately, that is the reality that we are presented with. It's a British colony. It's a European colony. I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect, really? Let me show you this clip of Netanyahu struggling. I mean, it's so funny. Really, just take a look.
Figures show that over 7,000 settlement homes have been advanced under your government since the start of the year. And these are widely criticised internationally, publicly and privately to you. They contravene international law. You have said in interviews I've seen in the past that it's the Palestinians that are the obstacle to peace. As the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said this week, it's settlements that are the physical obstacle to peace.
I think that's not true, and it's not new that I disagree with this. I also disagree that it's against international law because there's never been an international decision that says that Jews cannot live in Judea. That's where we come from.
No, but Article 49 of the Geneva Convention says that an occupying force cannot build on the land.
No, it cannot transfer people.
And build on the land.
Transfer people. Build on the land if it's your disputed...
Unless it's military.
If it's disputed territory, which it is. You call it occupied. We call it disputed. It's part of our ancestral homeland. I mean, we've only been attached to it for, 3,000 years. King David established our capital here in Jerusalem.
Dude, you're from Eastern Europe. Jesus, I've never seen someone so delusional. I mean, look, this is like if I went to I knocked on someone's door in France and I told them, my ancestor invaded with William the Conqueror. He left Normandy and invaded England, and that's where the Medhurst family and name come from. And so if I go like 1,000 years ago, this was my house, so you need to leave right now or I'm gonna kill you. Fucking like lunacy, the psychotic religious extremism in this guy's eyes. Like, how can you even utter this guy's supposedly a head of state, say, oh, I've been here 3,000 years ago. How do you even know where your family was 500 years ago? Never mind 3,000. Deluded. He's a lunatic. Again, I take that back. This is unfair to lunatics. This guy's something else. Christ. And he's trying to like argue about the Geneva Convention. It's like, well, it's disputed. It's not occupied. What?
Only 3,000 years ago. We're not the Belgians in the Congo or the Dutch in Indonesia.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man. Jesus, you absolutely are the Belgians in the Congo. That's what you don't understand. Everyone can see this. Everyone on planet Earth can see that Israel is brutalizing the Palestinians in very, very similar ways, almost exactly, just like the Belgians in the Congo, perhaps on lesser numbers. It's the principle, right? You are the Belgians in the Congo. You are exactly, quite literally, a product of British imperialism, right? Balfour Declaration, 1917. We want to create a Jewish state in Palestine. It was a British mandate, a British colony handed over in 1948 to the Israeli militias, right? To the Zionist paramilitary groups. You are literally a product of British imperialism. That's what Israel is. It's a a thorn in the side of the Arabs, right in the middle of the Arab world, between Morocco and Saudi Arabia, right in the middle, to splinter the Arab world, to keep them in combat and in dispute and destabilize them for decades and decades. Has that not manifested? Is that not what happened? What is that? This guy's a lunatic. Like who is his housing agent? God, right? That's what he's saying, right? You remember his ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Dunnan, the Israeli ambassador to the UN. I showed this video where he's showing up to the UN General Assembly in New York with a Bible in his hand. If he were outside on the street, people would laugh at him like you're some kind of religious lunatic. That's what Zionism is. Unfortunately, it's very political and not religious whatsoever. I mean, they just it's like ISIS. They hijack Islam and use that as like they try to frame it as like, well, it's a religious thing. God gave us the right to behave like this, or the Crusaders, right? Like God sent us to massacre everyone in Jerusalem, including the Christians, by the way, and we have to liberate the Holy Land, right? We have to liberate it of every other human being, right? Yeah, very, very religious of you.
God's sake, this is the land of Israel. It's our country. So I completely...
It's his country, man. It's his country. God gave it to him like 3,000 years ago. He was there, right? Jesus, he's like those elves, right, in Lord of the Rings. Like, I was there 5,000 years ago when Isildur was...
I agree with that. But I think one thing is true. The Palestinians are here, and we're not going to push them out. We're here.
That's actually a lie. You're literally killing one Palestinian a day. Calculate it yourself, right? We are in June. Every single day this year, they've been killing a Palestinian, one per day. And the Israelis also had a secret plan to ship Palestinians to Latin America, right? Which is ethnic cleansing, right? And they literally wiped out so many villages, so many Palestinian villages, right? This was in 1947 and 1948 when they knew the English are going to leave, right? Well, sort of, and then we will take it, and they wiped out Palestinian villages, eradicated them completely. You had hundreds of thousands of people that fled in the Nakba. Israel has done nothing but push Palestinians out. So many of them refugees, in their own country or next door in Syria, Lebanon, in Jordan. Yeah.
Here, and they're not going to push us out. But that's not the reason.
No, they will push you out, and they should, because you are European and you're masquerading as some kind of indigenous person. You can look, if your grandfather or your father comes from some European country, you can get nationality. You have a choice. Palestinians don't have a choice. Who's going to give them a passport? They don't even have one country. You got Israelis with like 2-3 passports, and Palestinians don't even have one. They get if they are able to even get travel visas to go somewhere. No one even knows what their travel documents are because they're refugees. The entitlement is something else, right? With with Israelis, really something else. The Congo, people in the Congo have every goddamn right on earth to push out people from Belgium. Algerians have every right to kick out the French from their land, and Palestinians have every right to kick out the Israeli Zionist European colonizers from their land. Same thing in Syria and the Golan Heights. Every right. It's in international law. It's not my opinion. If I cease to exist in the next 5 minutes, it would still be international law. It's not my opinion.
Successive governments, were unable to make peace. After all, they were here. They weren't building. They were freezing. There were, 4 or 5 prime ministers who were left of the Likud and left of me, before me and after me, couldn't make peace with the Palestinians. Why? Because the Palestinians, unfortunately, have been commandeered by a leadership that doesn't want peace with Israel. They want a peace without Israel.
Once again, this is a lie, and even if it were true, why should they accept, Israeli colonialism? Why are you like this is really crazy. Like he's saying that they are the aggressors and they don't want to make peace with us. Why should they make peace with you? You are on their land. You are European. Why are you trying to hide from this fact? I told you, go look up the list of Israeli prime ministers. Every single one of them is either born in Europe, or their parents were born in Europe, or their grandparents were born in Europe. So their whole thing, Zionism, is a movement, a political movement of going, mass emigrating to Palestine and taking it for themselves, right? Under this lunatic, lunatic idea that God gave them this land. What are you? You got a personal line, with God? Where does it say that? Who gave you the right? If someone doesn't believe in God, what do you tell them? Right? This is crazy, and the fact that he can pass for a head of state is funny. I just read to you, by the way, we were just talking about this peace initiative in 2002, right? It's still on the table. The Saudis are saying right now, we will normalize with Israel if they respect the rights of the Palestinians and they follow the 2002 peace initiative. The Israelis don't care. Every time there's been some sort of they're at a crossroads and there's some hope of a political settlement or a diplomatic settlement, the Israelis always sabotage it. And let's look at the Oslo Accords. What did the Palestinians get from the Oslo Accords? We are 3 decades in the future now. What did they get? Palestine is still carved up. They carved it up into more pieces, like Zone A, B, C, right? Israelis are constantly raiding Jenin, raiding Nablus, raiding the West Bank. They're constantly bombing Gaza. What did the Palestinians get from these accords with the Israelis? Zero. Nothing whatsoever. Zero. You could even say they're worse off now than they were then. Because now they've outsourced the occupation to the PLO, to the Palestinian Authority. What did they get? So he's a complete liar. And again, even if the Palestinians don't want diplomacy, it's like, you saying that the Algerians should have sued for peace and made some diplomatic settlement with the French. Get out! Go home! Get out! What is this madness? You're supposed to, make peace. And no, they're not. No, you can make peace by going home. If you try to enter a country illegally, man, they will arrest you and deport you. You can't start going into somebody else's house, with a machine gun or with a rifle and subjugating them. What is this?
Next to Israel, they want a state instead of Israel, and that is the persistent Palestinian refusal to.
Yeah, like I said, it's their right.
Recognize a Jewish state in any border.
No. See, he tries to make this, they refuse to recognize it because it's a Jewish state. No, there's no problem with Jews. You got Arab Jews, Arab Christian, Arab this, Arab that. There's a million flavors of Arab. There's nothing to do with they refuse to recognize a Jewish state. No, they refuse to recognize an Israeli European colonizer state. I'm not going to play 2 more minutes of Netanyahu. I think my point is well taken, and I'm going to leave it at that.